Hey, and welcome to West Church Lake Norman. We are so glad that you are taking a few minutes out of your busy life to check us out and listen to the message. Today, we are going to be talking about help, asking for help. How prone are you to ask for help? On a scale from 1 to 10, a 10 being you are willing to ask for help, then great. And if you're not willing to ask for help, like that's a 1. There's something powerful that comes and happens when we are willing to admit that we can't do it all by ourselves and that we need help. Actually, it helps us draw closer to God, believe it or not. So we're going to explore that for a few minutes this morning. If it's the first time you've ever worshiped with West or listened to one of our messages, we would love to know that. You can text the word welcome to 704 343 8955 704 343 8955. Text the word welcome. Let us know that you have listened or watched the message. My name is Andrea Smith. I have the privilege of being the pastor of West Church, and we hope that you find today's experience meaningful and relevant. Thanks for joining in. Have you ever felt like or thought that prayer was really nothing more than just some hocus pocus? That's why we have a makeshift crystal ball here to my right. We think sometimes, or I feel like at least, that when I offer prayer, like it's going into the great beyond of nothingness, and sometimes I feel like my prayers aren't heard, or certainly that they aren't answered. And I don't believe that I'm alone in thinking or feeling that way. Probably at some point in each of our lives, and if in our journeys, if we are a Christ follower and we believe in the power of prayer, even if we believe it, there are times in our lives that we feel like it doesn't work and our prayers are just coming up against a brick wall. For others that may be new to a faith journey or exploring what it means to be a follower of Christ or a believer in God, what is prayer? Prayer is conversation and communion, an experience, a relationship that we have with God. And we believe that God is not a human being sitting on some big chair far, far away. We believe that God resides and rests in each of us, that God is love. Prayer is a conversation and a deepening experience with that love. And in this message series, does prayer work, or is it just hocus pocus? We're exploring how to pray. And there's actually it's not as complicated as we think that it is. In fact, prayer can happen and will happen if we just utter some very simple words like here. We talked about that a few weeks ago, that if we will just merely say the word here, then we are enabling God to be connecting with us, because we're opening ourselves up to that space and allowing God and the peace that comes with God to work in us, to fill us up. And then we talked about the word thanks, that just saying the word thanks, even when, or maybe even especially when we don't feel thankful, that's another way of allowing God, love, the divine love and energy to work in us and with us. So today I have a different word that I want us to explore, and it is the word help. I don't know about you, but I have a problem asking for help. I would not have said that about myself until people that are closest to me said it to me and for me. I want to show you a picture. This happened, May, a year and a half ago almost. I had just moved into my new home in Troutman, and as irony would have it, I closed on the home the day the world basically shut down because of COVID. Literally, I closed on a Friday, and I'm pretty sure that was the last day that we weren't in absolute lockdown and quarantine. So I want to show you a picture. Tom, my significant other, we went in together and built a 3-car garage at the bottom part of my property because he is a car fanatic, I guess is a good word. He's a car guru. He restores and builds classic cars, and I'm fascinated with that as a hobby. And so we decided that we would go in together and create a space for him to be able to do that, and it would be partially my space for my little projects as well. So we went in together. We built this 3-car garage at the bottom of my property, and there's a slight hill going down into the garage. Well, it was in May. The building had been built for a couple of months, and I didn't think anything about the ground being, not sturdy or perhaps a little muddy. I'd been out of town. We had been out of town that weekend, actually, and came back. And on that Monday, it was Memorial Day Monday. I was so excited about having all day to just do some projects that I wanted to get accomplished. And one of the first things on my list was to clean out my car. I wanted to vacuum my car, and I was so excited about using this car garage to go do it. So I drove my car, which is a Mustang. I drove my car down to the first door on the left. I was going to get it in and start vacuuming, and I want to show you what happened next. Do you see the ruts? Apparently, Troutman and Mooresville had received some kind of record rain that weekend, and the ground was so muddy. My tires started to spin, and I thought, oh no. Now, I've never been driving when I've gotten stuck in the mud, so I feel confident that I only exacerbated the problem by not stopping and asking for help. I thought, okay, well, what if I turn my tires in a different direction? Then maybe I can back out. And that didn't seem to work. The ruts just started getting lower and lower. And then I thought, okay, I've seen things on TV like this, and they go get something and put it under the tires to give the tires leverage and some traction. So I started looking around. I didn't have any wood, and so I thought, well, there's some cardboard left over from some boxes. I'll go get some cardboard and put it underneath the tire. So I did that, and the tires by this point had gotten so stuck in the mud that they would not move at all. So then I decided I was just going to push the car. I was going to put the car in neutral and push it and try to push it up on the cardboard. All the time I'm doing this, and I'm thinking my neighbors are probably filming this for YouTube. Let's show you what our new stupid neighbor has done. And honestly, it was just the biggest cluster ever. The car kept getting more and more stuck. I never could get it up on the cardboard. I looked stupid. I was frustrated, embarrassed. And so I thought, okay, what do I do now? I can't leave the car here forever. Now, first through my mind was I should call Tom. And I thought, no, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to admit what I've done. I don't want him to think I'm stupid. I don't want him to think that I can't handle problems by myself. So I will not be calling Tom. So I called my friend who also has a Mustang, and I'm like, I've gotten my car stuck. What do you think I should do? Can you come help me push it out of the mud? And she's like, look, I'd do anything for you, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to help you push your car out of the mud. And honestly, she is one of few people that I'd even admit this to. Well, now I'm admitting it to hundreds of people, but back then I would not admit it in the moment to anybody else. I was not going to call any of my other friends that had bigger cars or anything because I didn't want to ask for help. Finally, I remembered, oh, I have AAA. So I called AAA. They came. I thought it was free, included in my membership. Apparently it's not when it's, so I don't remember. He could not even put his truck in the grass because he was driving this big truck. He's like, ma'am, if you just had somebody or knew somebody with a pickup truck, they could do this so much easier than I could. Now, Tom drives a pickup truck, and I'm thinking, thank you, sir. And then he gave me the bill. It was over $100. I'm like, well, there you go. Like, not only have I not used the resource that I had at hand, but now I've had to spend an additional $100. Now, I wanted to cover up my mistake. But later that evening, I think Tom was asking me, like, we had each planned on getting certain tasks accomplished that day. And he's like, well, did you check VRBO for our summer vacation with our kids? And I'm like, no, I didn't really have time to do that today. And he's like, well, what'd you do? I mean, and it looked like I'd been sitting around just eating bonbons all day long, when in actuality, this car drama took me like 3 hours from start to finish. And I guess I looked sheepish or whatever. And he's like, what'd you do? And so I told him. Now, I thought he would laugh. I thought he'd find it funny and be like, oh, haha, you're so silly. How did you do that? He actually, I mean, he can get angry, but he really got frustrated with me. He's like, why would you do that? And I'm like, look, I told you I didn't know the ground was wet. He goes, no. Why would you call AAA? Why didn't you just call me? And I'm like, you're mad at me because I didn't call you? He goes, no, I'm not mad. I'm just frustrated. And then he used the big word, and disappointed. I'm disappointed that you don't trust me enough and that you don't love me enough to ask for help. He said, it's okay to need some help sometimes. You know, that's a very human relationship. And he was spot on. I didn't, and it was not an ego thing, like I wanted to be like, I got my car out all by myself. It was actually a vulnerability thing. I didn't want to need anything from anyone, because if I and you and we allow ourselves to need things, then there's a chance that we're not going to get what we need. And when our needs aren't met, we end up experiencing sadness and pain and disappointment. That happens in our human relationships with one another. And guess what? It's going to happen because we are human. But believe it or not, those very same things happen in our relationship with God. We don't always willingly admit that we need help, for lots of reasons, but one of the driving ones is the fact that when we admit we need help, we are opening ourselves up to perhaps not receiving exactly what we think we need, and then we get disappointed and hurt and afraid. Prayer, it does work. It works perhaps in different ways than we may think that it does. So this morning, I want to invite us for a few minutes to think about the word help, asking for help, not just from each other, but from God, and what that does in us and what it does through us and for us. I want you to take a look at this quote by Thomas à Kempis. The acknowledgement of our weakness is the first step in repairing our loss. The acknowledgement of our weakness is the first step in repairing our loss. So I'd invite you for just a few minutes right now to think about, what are some areas that you're weak in? I'm not talking about organization or cleanliness or, like math or science or a skill like that. Where in your life, in your temperament, in your personality, in the way that you're made up, in the way that you tick, in the way that you think, where are you weak? Is it that you are prone to anxiety or anger or exhaustion or fear? where is it that you are experiencing some weakness right now? And I would encourage us as we think about our areas of weakness to realize that as we acknowledge them, then if we will actually relinquish them to a force that's greater than anything we have the power to do, that's where we find wholeness and that's where we find peace. So I want us to look a little deeper into that. So we take help, and if we will acknowledge that we need help, it will bind us to God in a much stronger and more powerful way by three different things, like our needs and our weaknesses. That binds us to God when we admit what we need and we acknowledge where we are weak. And then the next thing that binds us to God is when we admit that we have unfulfilled hopes and dreams, that we want something that perhaps we don't have, or we have dreamed and desired for something for so long. We've prayed for it. We've wanted it. We've done everything in our power to try to achieve it or receive it, and it has never come. So admitting that we have needs and weaknesses, admitting that we have unfulfilled hopes and unfulfilled dreams, and then lastly, our anxieties and our problems. So all these things, they're bound up together, and we each experience something in these things. It's whether or not we admit it. But if we will admit it, and if we will admit that we need help, that is where the answer comes. Because you see, here's what calling out to God and saying help does. It isn't like a vending machine, God, where we go up and we've got this giant vending machine and we're like, okay, more money, A1, better health, C4, more physical fitness, more muscle tone, skinnier, taller, better physical appearance, H20. You know how they have all the little letters and all the numbers in a vending machine? That's how we treat our prayer life sometimes. Like we have things that we're anxious about, or things that are problems in our lives, or unfulfilled dreams. And we go up to this vending machine in our mind and we're like, okay, God, I would like this situation to be resolved completely and quickly, and this is how I want it to be, and this is the resolution that I'm looking for, A1. Or, so one of my prayers personally right now in my life is to try to figure out how to lead church in a new age, and try to figure out what it is that you need from a physical church, even if the physical church that you are looking for is not a physical location that you come to once a week or whatever frequency church happens for folks. Like, you're looking for faith, or you wouldn't be checking out this podcast or this message or this online worship experience. You're looking for something. But honestly, I've never led an organization post-pandemic. I've also never led an organization that was completely dependent on being, centered around 1 hour on a Sunday morning, whether it was live or in person. It was still the same hour. And now it's a whole new world. You need different things in this new world. And so I'm trying to figure that out. We have a great staff team that's trying to help figure that out. We have key leaders that are trying to figure it out. I mean, we're all working to figure it out. But I would like some answers. I'd like a very clear path. And I would like to feel like I'm in control of the situation instead of the situation being in control of me. I've been praying for this for a long time. I think I've pretty much hit every vending machine button asking God for an answer to this prayer. And guess what? It's one of those unanswered or unfulfilled dreams and prayers, because like my dream, Andrea Smith's dream, was I'd like for the high school to get back to being packed with 250, 300 people with 100 folks online. That's my dream. Keep praying for that. And in a few minutes, I'll leave this filming and I'll go to the high school. And I can assure you, unless some massive miracle has happened, which probably has not, there will not be 300 people in that high school. But one of the powerful things that keeps happening to me is that, I see your names in the chat room on Sunday morning at 9. Or I get messages from you. Hey, I listened to the podcast this week. I listened to the message on podcast, or I checked it out on demand from the website. But if you were to ask me if God is answering my prayer, I would tell you no, because the vending machine button that I am pushing, the answer is not coming. But if we will understand that when we cry out to God or just simply say, help, that prayer expands us. It makes us bigger. It makes our minds more broad. It makes our understanding and our perspective deeper and richer. And it removes our self-reliance. There was a season in this reopening phase for us as West that there were a couple of weeks that every morning, 2 a.m., I would be up. And I'd stay up for the rest of the day. And some mornings I'd be at the office by 4:30 a.m. or 5 a.m. And I remember thinking, this is not a sustainable pace. And at one point in my prayer life and in my meditation, I'm like, why am I doing this? What's the point? The 4 a.m. point. And I thought, well, maybe if I work a little harder, if I work a little longer, if I put in a few more hours at the office, I can fix this. And so I kept praying, God, I need you to help me. And you know what happened, actually? Instead of the high school being packed, I was able to start to see, there are other ways that this prayer is being answered. It's just not the way that I wanted it answered. So that's one of the important things that I think we need to take away from this message today, that there is a difference between an immature petition to God, an immature ask, and a mature ask. And I'm not saying that either is wrong, because I'm going to let you know that probably 80%, if not higher, of my prayer and my petitions, they fall in the immature category, because I am so human. I want God to fix things like I want them fixed. I want relationships to be perfect and easy, and I want my job to be perfect and easy, and I want my bank account to have endless funds, and I want all those things. And in Philippians, it tells us that we should turn our anxieties and our worries into prayer, and God will fulfill our prayers. He will hear our requests, and He will turn our worries and anxieties into peace. But what we have to understand is that God is not a giant vending machine. And that ultimately, our prayer and the prayer that Jesus taught His disciples to pray, and ultimately us to pray, is there's this line in there, thy will, God, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And what that means is, let us not be so reliant on ourselves and wanting it to be our way. But what if we start to pray, and what if we start to turn our anxieties and our needs and our unfulfilled dreams, and we ask, okay, God, I need you to help me with this situation. Help me find peace. Help me be not what I want to be, and this to be resolved in my way and my image. But what if instead we start asking, okay, God, help this be resolved in your image? That's the difference between an immature prayer and petition and a mature prayer and petition. We stop praying that we want it our way, and we start praying, God, help me. Help me see, help me find peace, help me gain new perspective. What can I learn here? How can this shape me? When we do that, it expands who we are. It takes away our reliance on ourselves and puts our reliance on a power that truly is bigger than we are. So I want you to ask yourself, which is better? Being humbly dependent on God and God's power and actually surviving, or being proudly independent and drowning in our pain and our anxieties. It's okay to need things, and it's okay to ask for help. When we ask for help, it enables us to partner with God. So God becomes our friend, our ally. And it turns our challenges and our anxieties and our fears and our unfulfilled dreams and our problems, it turns those into opportunities. So I want us to get really real for just a few minutes, and I want us to talk about anxieties and some of the things that happen in our lives. Anxieties tend to make catastrophes out of things that actually aren't as big and aren't as horrific as we think they are. It inflates every risk into a potential cataclysm, like boom, it's all like falling apart. That's what our anxieties and our worries do. Have you ever found that happening to you? Like you start out, you're having a good day or a good experience, a good meeting, anything like that, and then something goes wrong, and it doesn't go exactly the way that you want it to, and then you go in your head. You start thinking about it and even thinking about it a little more, and then you start to worry about it, and then you start dreaming up all these potential scenarios, and before you know it, you have turned like one tiny thing into this huge thing. It's a catastrophe. That's what anxiety and worry does. So for a few minutes, I want us to think about turning our anxieties into request. Let's take some of the things that happen in us when we have anxiety. One of the things is anxiety manifests itself in anger. Like when I am anxious about something, I have it what's called a hair trigger. Like Friday afternoon, we had the privilege, Amy Coles and I, of leading and officiating Lindsay Snipes and Christopher Hampton's wedding. And I get nervous every Sunday that I preach or speak. And weddings are actually, for me, worse than a sermon. And because it's their big day, right? And I don't want to be the one to mess it up. And I have made mistakes in weddings. I think every preacher has. One time I called the man the woman because they both had the name Chris. And her first name was Chris and his last name was Chris. And I just kept getting so confused. And I actually had 3 weddings in one day, which I'll never do that again. And I just was so discombobulated, I called her Chris or him Chris or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And they corrected me, but I was mortified that I had messed up their big day. So now I get really anxious before a wedding because I want it to be perfect for them. So by Friday night, when it was time for the wedding, I was wound up so tight. If you looked at me sideways, I was like, ah, and so tempted to get angry. I'm like, why am I so grumpy? And why am I so ill? And I'm like, oh, I'm anxious. That's actually a perfect time to have a moment of prayer. believe it or not, that's when we can go to God. Remember, God resides in each of us. It's that power that we can connect to by conversation, by enjoying that relationship and opening ourselves up to that relationship. The way that we do it is by saying, help. All right, God, help me. I'm anxious. Help me, God. I'm angry. Help me turn my anger into peace or contentment. Or our anxiety can manifest itself with fear. So God, help me not be afraid. God, turn my fear into courage. God, show me what courageous looks like or bravery looks like in this situation. Sometimes when we have anxiety, we get confused about things and we can't really wrap our minds around a situation. So in that, we're called to cry out, help, God. Turn my confusion into clarity. Give me clarity. Give me wisdom. Or what about exhaustion? Do you ever feel exhausted? Anxiety causes us to feel exhausted because we're so anxious. What if we use the help prayer and we say, help, God, turn my exhaustion into resilience. Help me become more resilient so that as I continue to go through life and continue to face crappy situations, I'll be able to handle them better. I want us to think about anxieties and hurt and disappointment, because those three things are very closely related. Anxieties focus on what might happen. That's when we start to worry about things. Anxieties focus on what might happen. Hurt, when we're hurt, that focuses on what has happened. So that's a past. Anxiety is the future. Hurt is the past. And disappointment, that focuses on what has not happened. But the beautiful thing is when we cry out for help, God takes our anxieties, God takes our hurts, and God takes our disappointment. And in some mystical, magical, hocus pocus kind of way, there is peace and there's healing. Because when we cry out and we ask for help, we're not being self-reliant. We're not asking for immature prayer requests like, give me this or give me that. We're saying, help me. Enable me to take this bad stuff and learn from it or turn it into good. God, help turn it into good. And in that, we grow closer to God. So I want you to think about that and be willing to do that, not just today, but this week and always. Be willing to ask for help. Richard Rohr, who is just one of the most amazing modern theologians, he says, pain that is not processed is projected. Pain that is not processed is projected. And pain that is not transformed is transmitted. So if you've got pain or anxieties or hurt or disappointment, and if you don't do something with it, it is messing up your life. It's messing up your relationships. It's messing up your mental health. It's messing up your physical health because studies have shown that stress and anxiety do more havoc on our bodies than, 20 bags of Cheetos. It really does damage our physical and mental and emotional health. So it's important that we are willing to take these negative things and turn them over so that transformation can happen. and so that we're not projecting and transmitting it to other people. And the way that that transformation happens, it's really simple. We just have to ask for help. One would think I would learn that lesson. I hope you learn it a little easier than I do. People have been trying to tell me to ask for help for years. Mentors at other appointments in the United Methodist Church, other positions that I had in churches, I'd end up trying to do something all by myself. They're like, why didn't you ask for help? I didn't want to need anything. I didn't want to bother anyone. They're like, that's why we're here. Ask for help. Right after I moved, I was driving Tom's truck because I needed to continue to move some things. And I'd gone to the grocery store. Remember, it's the height of the pandemic, so it was a get in and get out kind of situation. I had not driven his truck before, and I have an issue with keys on a good day. Like, I lose them on a good day. So this was not one of my most stellar moments. I thought I was doing a good thing. I always try to put the buggies up so that somebody else won't have to do it. So bad idea was to leave the keys in the truck while I put the buggy away. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't lock the keys in the truck. So as soon as I laid them down in the seat, I pressed the lock button on the door so that I would be able to come back and get in the truck and drive the truck back to my house. Now, the problem was that I'd never used the truck before. And my brain does not think logically like a lot of other people's brains. I'm more of a creative, whimsical kind of person. And so I thought the picture meant unlock, but really it just meant lock. So here we are, height of the pandemic. You're not even supposed to be like out of your house. And I have locked myself out of Tom's truck. The bigger problem is that my cell phones, my work and my personal phones, were both also in the truck, as was my wallet. I had nothing. Remember, it's a pandemic, not a lot of people around. And the people that were around, I mean, you're supposed to stay 6 feet apart, right? Like, nobody's coming over and asking me to help. And I didn't want to go up to anybody because I didn't want to scare them. So I had to go back in Harris Teeter, go up to customer service and give them this song and dance and pity party. And the even worse thing is I didn't remember anyone's phone number because all the phone numbers are in my phone. I had no idea how to get in touch with anyone. I had to ask for a computer so I could Google and try to find out some phone numbers. I finally somehow remembered my daughter's phone number, but she was in Boone, so that was not helpful. And then I knew that a friend of mine worked at a realty company and another one at a medical office. So I was able to call both of those folks, and they're like, well, what do you want us to do? I'm like, well, I don't know, but I need help. I'm like, Tom's truck is out there. I don't want to call AAA because I don't want to mess up the door lock. And they're like, well, have you called Tom? I'm like, no. I don't want to tell him that I have locked his keys out of his or in his truck. They're like, well, I think that's your best plan. Long story short, and about an hour and a half with the very kind Harris Teeter personnel, I had devised this big scheme, like I was going to get somebody to come get me and then take me to Tom's house, and they were going to distract him, and I was going to sneak in and get his car key and then come back and get the truck, and he'd never know that I had done it. Finally, I just called some friends. They came and got me, and they took me to Tom's house, and I said, just go on and leave. I don't really need a witness for me to have to reveal this to him. When I told him, he just shook his head, and he's like, why didn't you call me? I have a spare key. Why didn't you just ask for help? Both times that I've been unwilling to ask for help, I have created more problems for me and lots of other people. The words actually that stuck with me the most, though, that he said were, do you just not trust me enough to ask for help? I ask for help now. And believe it or not, my ability to ask him for help has made us closer and stronger as a couple. And he asked me for help too. Not only do we need to ask for help from our physical relationships and the people here that we can see and touch, but if we want real transformation and real peace and real hope, we'll learn that the one that we ultimately ask for help is God, because that transforms all of our pain and anxiety and fear and discomfort. And that is the one that we can trust infinitely, because God's love and God's grace never disappoints. It may not be the answer that we, in our very human understanding, are looking for. But we're told over and over again in Scripture that God takes even the most horrific things. We don't believe God causes horrific things, but we believe God takes horrific things and works them for good. We need to cry out for help. Will you pray with me? Gracious God, it's humbling to have to admit that we need help. We want to be able to do it all by ourselves. We want to have it all figured out, and we just can't. And when we don't ask for help, it gets us into trouble. Will you please work in us and convict us that it's okay to even have immature prayer requests and want you to be a giant vending machine, but hopefully we move through that, and finally we just cry out for help and say, show me, teach me, use me, mold me, shape me, change me, so that I can be the hopeful and joyful and loving person you've created me to be. Help. In Christ's name. Amen. This week, I invite you very intentionally to be mindful of asking for help. Listen to this song and go in peace.